Welcome to a fresh deep dive. Today we're diving headfirst into something that trips up pretty much everyone learning English, and honestly anything new really. Making mistakes. But we're not just saying, oh, it's okay. We're here to explore why messing up is actually, well, super important. Totally necessary for getting fluent.
Exactly. Yeah, we've got this really interesting article that digs right into this idea how those stumbles, those slips of the tongue, are actually your secret weapon, maybe, for learning English faster.
A secret weapon, I like that.
Yeah. So our mission for this deep dive really is to completely change how you see those errors. We want you to stop cringing, and start seeing them for what they are, powerful shortcuts to getting better.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
How many times have you been about to say something, maybe, but then stopped yourself, worried it wouldn't be perfect?
Oh, all the time.
I know I've definitely done it, even just trying to order coffee in another language.
Yeah.
So this is your chance to understand why that hesitation, that fear of being wrong, it's actually slowing you down.
Yeah.
So let's unpack this. Why are these oops moments actually a good thing when you're learning English?
Well, the article makes a great point right off the bat. Mistakes are a clear sign you're actually putting the language to use.
Right.
If you're not making any, it probably means you're sticking inside your comfort zone, just using what you already know. You're not pushing yourself.
So no mistakes might mean no progress.
Kind of, yeah. The initial goal shouldn't be flawless English, but like the article puts it, it's about speaking freely, getting comfortable with using the language.
That totally resonates. It reminds me of, when a kid learns to walk, they don't just stand up and start sprinting. They wobble, they fall, maybe bump into the table.
Definitely, lots of bumps.
But each little mishap, each fall, it teaches them about balance, how to move. And the article makes that direct link to learning English every time you say, get a grammar rule wrong or use the wrong word.
Or mispronounce something.
Yeah, or just stumble over your words. It's like a mini lesson, right?
Precisely. Each mistake gives you this really specific piece of feedback. It's like your brain saying, hey, maybe pay a little more attention here.
Okay.
The article gives a perfect example. If you find yourself saying he goes to school instead of he goes to school, that immediately flags subject-verb agreement as something you need to look at again. And what's fascinating here, maybe a bit unexpected, is how efficiently these errors help you focus where you need to study.
It's like having a built-in tutor constantly pointing at exactly what needs work. Okay, now here's where it gets really interesting for me. This idea that actually making mistakes can boost your confidence. That almost sounds backward, doesn't it?
It does seem counterintuitive at first glance, yeah. But the logic actually holds up really well.
How so?
Well, the article explains that being terrified of making errors, that can be really paralyzing. It can make you just clam up, avoid speaking altogether, which obviously stops progress. But when you shift your perspective, when you accept that mistakes are just, part of the learning journey.
It frees you up.
Exactly. It frees you up to practice more. And we all know the more you practice, the more comfortable and fluent you become. And that naturally builds real confidence.
And I love this quote they included. Confidence is not knowing you will never make mistakes. It's knowing you can handle the mistakes you make.
That's such a great reframe, isn't it?
It really is. It shifts the focus from this impossible idea of perfection to building resilience, knowing you can learn and adapt when you stumble.
Exactly. And that ability to adapt, well, that leads us to another really important point the article makes. Understanding how English is actually used, in the real world.
Yeah. Not just textbook English.
Right. The English you learn from twist books is often very polished, grammatically perfect. but the English native speakers use every day. It's way more laid back.
Full of slang.
Full of slang, sometimes bends the grammar rules a little, and it's often spoken super fast.
Oh, totally. I've definitely had that experience. You study so hard, learn all the rules, and then you hear native speakers chatting, and it can feel like a completely different language.
It really can. And what's fascinating here, the article suggests, is that by making your own mistakes, trying things out, you start to develop an ear for what sounds natural and what doesn't in those real life situations.
You start getting a feel for the rhythm, the context.
Exactly. You begin to figure out how to adjust, how to pick up meaning from context, respond more naturally. You sort of start mirroring how native speakers navigate conversations, mistakes and all.
Okay, so we're definitely convinced why mistakes are helpful, even essential. Now let's get down to the nitty-gritty. The article breaks down some of the really common types of mistakes English learners make. Let's start with grammar. What are some typical grammar hiccups?
Yeah, the article points out a few big ones. Subject-verb agreement is super common, like saying she like apples instead of the correct she likes apples. Forgetting that os.
Right, the third person does.
Exactly. Tense errors are also really frequent. For example, mixing up past and present or future, like yesterday I go to market, when it should be yesterday I went to the market. Then you've got those tricky little prepositions, I'm good in English instead of I'm good at English is a classic one. Often influenced by our first language.
Ah, yeah, direct translation issues.
Precisely. And finally, word order can be a puzzle. Saying something like, I every day study English, instead of the standard, I study English every day. Again, often mirroring the structure of the learner's native language.
Those examples are spot on. I can totally see how your first language grammar sneaks in there.
Yeah.
What about vocabulary? What kind of word-related mistakes tend to pop up?
Vocabulary mistakes often involve, using the wrong word, especially with words that have similar meanings but aren't interchangeable, like confusing borrow and lend.
Oh yeah, like can you borrow me your pen?
Exactly, when it should be, can you lend me your pen? Another common thing is maybe relying too much on very basic words like good, bad, or nice.
When there are richer words available.
Right, like amazing, terrible, delightful, or challenging. Using more varied vocabulary makes your English more expressive. Then there's mispronunciation, especially stressing the wrong syllable, which can really affect understanding. Like stressing develop on the first syllable instead of the second. And we can't forget those sneaky false friends.
The words that look similar but mean different things.
Exactly. Like actual in English doesn't mean currently like actualmente does in Spanish. That can definitely trip you up.
Oh, absolutely. Okay, so grammar, vocabulary. Now how about the sounds? Pronunciation slip-ups.
Well, pronunciation mistakes often involve things like missing those important word endings, like not pronouncing the S on plural nouns, so cat sounds like cat.
Right, that can change the meaning.
It can. Incorrect stress within words is another big one, like saying photograph instead of photograph. That can make it harder for people to catch the word you mean. And of course, mixing up similar sounding words, vowels especially, like ship versus sheep, that can lead to some potentially funny misunderstandings.
I can just imagine. Okay, so those are some of the building blocks. What about when it comes to actually putting it all together and, speaking? What kinds of mistakes tend to happen in conversation?
Well, speaking, mistakes often stem from nerves, actually.
Makes sense.
Being nervous can make learners speed up way too much, which ironically makes their English harder to follow. Another big one is directly translating phrases or sentence structures from their first language.
Like the word order examples.
Exactly, but sometimes even more literally. The article gives this great example of a word-for-word translation that might end up sounding like, today, going market I am. It's grammatically jumbled in English.
Right. Sounds unnatural.
Very. And finally, as we touched on earlier, that fear of making mistakes can sometimes just stop people from speaking at all. Silence becomes the biggest mistake because you're not practicing.
That fear really is a tough hurdle. And what about the other side of communication listening? What kinds of mistakes do learners make when they're trying to understand spoken English?
Listening mistakes often happen because, well, native speakers tend to smush words together when they speak quickly.
Connected speech.
Yeah, exactly. Creating sounds like wadaya for what you or gonna for going to. That can be really confusing if you're expecting every word to be pronounced distinctly.
Definitely.
Also, just mishearing similar sounding words, maybe in fast speech or with background noise, like thinking someone said bear when they actually said bear. That's another common listening challenge.
Okay, so we've got a really good picture now of the types of mistakes people commonly make. So now for the really useful part. How do we actually learn from these mistakes and, get better? The article offers some really practical strategies. Let's start with mindset. That seems key.
Absolutely. The first, maybe most crucial step is to actively work on how you think about mistakes. Instead of seeing them as failures or something embarrassing, the article really encourages you to reframe them. See each one as a small victory, maybe, a sign that you're actually engaging, wrestling with the language, and learning.
Like a sign of effort.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keeping a mistake journal, just jotting down errors you notice yourself making, or that someone points out, and then looking back at it regularly can really help you spot patterns you might not notice otherwise.
That's a good idea.
And maybe surprisingly, the article suggests actually kind of celebrating mistakes. Acknowledge them, acknowledge you learned something new. It helps take away that negative emotional charge.
I really like that idea of celebrating mistakes. Takes the pressure right off.
Yeah.
Okay, the article also stresses getting regular feedback. That makes sense. How can you fix something if you don't know it's broken? How can learners actively get that feedback?
Getting feedback is absolutely key, and there are several ways. Practicing with native speakers, if possible, is super valuable. They can often gently correct you or offer a more natural way to say something. Joining English speaking clubs or conversation groups is great too. It's usually a relaxed environment and you get exposed to lots of different speaking styles and you can get feedback from peers. And here's one that might feel a bit strange at first, but the article says it's really effective recording yourself speaking.
Ooh, yeah. Listening back to yourself.
Exactly. Then listening back, it can be incredibly eye-opening for hearing your own pronunciation, grammar patterns, your fluency, your filler words, things you just don't notice while you're talking.
Recording myself sound a little daunting, I have to admit, but I can totally see how powerful that self-feedback could be. Now, the article also suggests focusing on one type of mistake at a time. Tell us more about that approach.
Yeah, this is about avoiding overwhelm. Trying to fix every single error all at once is just, well, it's impossible and likely to make you want to give up.
Right. Too much.
So the article recommends picking one specific area to focus on each week, or maybe for a couple of weeks. For instance, one week you might really concentrate on getting your subject-verb agreement right in the present tense.
Okay.
The next week, maybe you focus on using common prepositions like at, in, on correctly. Then maybe the week after, you pay close attention to word stress in new vocabulary you're learning.
So it's like targeted practice.
Exactly. This way you can really hone in, practice deliberately, and actually see noticeable improvement in that specific area over time, which is really motivating.
That sounds much more manageable than trying to boil the ocean. What other active ways of learning does the article suggest? It emphasizes being active, not passive.
Yes, definitely active over passive. Techniques like shadowing are mentioned. That's where you listen to a sentence or a short audio clip and immediately repeat it, trying to mimic the pronunciation, the rhythm, the intonation as closely as possible. It's great for speaking flow.
Okay, I've heard of that.
Another great active practice method is simply talking to yourself. Yeah, just narrate what you're doing during the day in English. Okay, now I'm making coffee, I'm pouring the water. It gets you producing language constantly. And writing, too. Writing short paragraphs regularly on different topics, then carefully reviewing them for errors or getting someone else to really help solidify grammar and vocabulary.
Those are all really practical, hands-on tips. And here's something the article points out that I think a lot of learners forget. It's okay to slow down when you speak.
Oh, absolutely crucial. Being clear is way more important than speaking super fast, especially when you're still learning.
Right.
There's this pressure, I think, learners feel sometimes that they need to speak quickly to sound fluent. But honestly, focusing on speaking clearly, articulating your words, even if you need to pause for a second to think about how to phrase something, that will make you much easier to understand.
And probably help avoid some simple mistakes made in haste.
Exactly. And as the article reminds us, even native speakers pause, use filler words like restart sentences. It's a totally natural part of conversation. Clarity over speed, especially early on.
That's really reassuring. I also thought the suggestion to learn common phrases and sentence structures like whole chunks was really smart. Why is that so effective?
It's effective because by memorizing whole chunks of language, things like, I'm looking forward to, could you please help me with, or common ways to express opinions like, in my opinion. Oh no, you're essentially learning ready-made, grammatically correct pieces of English.
Like prefabricated sentences.
Kind of, yeah. It means you don't have to mentally construct every single sentence from scratch, figuring out the grammar word by word. This reduces the cognitive load and cuts down the chance of making basic grammatical mistakes within those chunks. It gives you these reliable islands of fluency to build upon.
That's a really practical way to build a base of correct language quickly. Okay, finally, the article mentions doing specific mistake correction exercises. What exactly does that involve?
These exercises are all about actively engaging with errors, finding them, and fixing them. You could, for instance, take a paragraph that someone has written with intentional mistakes in it and try to identify and correct them all, like a puzzle.
Exactly. Or perhaps even more powerfully, right after you finish speaking in English, maybe you recorded yourself or just finished a conversation, take a moment to reflect. Think back on what you said. Try to identify any mistakes you think you might have made and figure out the correction yourself.
Ah, that immediate self-correction loop.
Precisely. That immediate feedback loop, even if it's just you reviewing your own speech, can really help solidify the learning from your errors much faster.
Okay, so we've covered a ton of really useful strategies there for actually using mistakes to learn. Now, the article wraps up with some really inspiring stories about well-known people who, well, made tons of mistakes learning English, but went on to achieve amazing things. Can you share those?
Yeah, they're great examples. The article highlights Jack Ma, the founder of Alibaba. Apparently, he spoke quite basic and error-filled English in his early international dealings.
Yeah, but he just pushed through. He wasn't afraid to make mistakes. In fact, he made lots of them, learned from them, kept communicating. And eventually, he became fluent enough to give major international interviews, lead a global company. His message got through despite the initial imperfections.
That's incredible. It wasn't about perfect English from day one.
Not at all. And another great example mentioned is Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Ah, yes.
Even today, he has a very distinct Austrian accent. And certainly early in his career, his English had grammatical errors. But he never let that stop him from communicating his ideas, pursuing acting, politics. He became a massive global star and public speaker. The mistakes didn't define or limit him.
Those stories are just so encouraging, aren't they? They really drive home the point that making mistakes isn't some kind of fatal flaw or roadblock to success. In many ways, it seems it's actually part of the path to success.
I think that's exactly right.
It's about being willing to be imperfect, to keep going, keep learning, even when you don't get it right the first time, maybe even the 10th time.
Exactly. And the article's conclusion really pulls it all together beautifully. Learning English, it argues, isn't about waiting until you achieve some mythical state of perfection before you dare to speak.
Right.
It's about having the courage to speak now, to engage, to learn from every interaction, and to gradually, steadily improve. Mistakes aren't the enemy. They are, as the article nicely puts it, your best teachers.
That's such a great way to think about it. Okay, so let's quickly recap those key takeaways before we wrap up this deep dive. What should listeners really hold on to?
Okay, key things. First, every mistake you make is actually a step forward, proof you're trying. Second, the fear of mistakes is what really holds you back, much more than the mistakes themselves.
Crucial point.
Third, accepting errors as just a normal, necessary part of the learning process is absolutely vital. Fourth, focus on making progress, communicating your message, not on being perfect right out of the gate.
Progress over perfection.
Exactly. And maybe the most surprising one, the more mistakes you make and learn from, the faster you'll actually improve in the long run. Don't shy away from them.
That's a perfect summary. So for you listening, the one big thing to really take away from this deep dive is this. Just go out there, speak English, make those mistakes.
And it's okay.
It's totally okay. Maybe even smile when you notice one, because you know it's a learning opportunity. Every word you speak, every error you make and reflect on is taking you closer to becoming that confident, fluent English speaker you want to be.
Well said.
And on that note, we'll leave you with one final thought to mull over. What's one specific mistake, maybe one you've been a bit scared of making, that you're going to try and embrace and learn from starting today? Thanks for diving deep with us.